You're listening to Underworld on the Ghost Radio Network.
Ghost Radio Australia.
Listen.
Hauntings. The unexplained. Synchronicity. EVP.
So why are you?
I heard that.
Absolutely fascinating.
What are Midlights? Is it real? What do you think?
I love you.
The unseen.
I'm alright.
1111. Who or what are mutilating cattle?
Listen.
Poltergeists. Your stories. Your experiences. Listen close.
Drunvalo Melchizedek is an author and educator whose work involving sacred geometry and its connection to our awakening consciousness is unparalleled. Drunvalo has visited over 60 countries and given countless workshops and presentations in the flower of life, meditation, spirituality, and the messages of our Indigenous nations. Right now, though, he's my guest here with me. Welcome to Ghost Radio.
Oh, thank you so much, Leah.
Now, say your name for us so that everybody can see how I just said it wrong.
My name is Drunvalo Melchizedek. That's how most people pronounce it, but whatever way you say is fine with me.
It's okay. Now, just occasionally I come across an educator or an author whose work is so vast and it's so great and it's also important that I think, wow, where am I going to start with this and how can I all fit it into one interview? Because all of your work is so important and it's, it seems to be so important. That was the task I was faced with this week, people, so in preparing this chat with you. So I just sort of course, at this point, the best point to start was at the beginning, obviously. But then we are going to cross over into your latest work, The Serpent of the Light. But perhaps now, as a starting point, let's go back to the beginning and you can tell people briefly about your background. You came from a physics maths area of life right at the beginning, but then you moved to Canada and a couple of beautiful angels changed all that. Can you tell us about the very beginning?
Well, in the beginning, I decided to study meditation, and along with my wife at that time, and we chose a Hindu teacher, and we were studying using mantras, and we were doing exactly as he said and following the instructions, and we were very serious. We made white silk robes with hoods and everything. And we were in there one morning doing this, and these two balls of light, they were about the size of a soccer ball, came into the room. One was a bright kind of green color, and the other one was sort of an ultraviolet purple. And they came right up to us, and they were there, and they were not just an illusion. They were really real. We both saw them, and they spoke to us inside of our head telepathically, and they said that we are not separate from you. We are you. And it took me a long time to understand that first introduction, that I exist on another level of life as them. And from that, I discovered that everybody does. Every single person in the world has at least two angels that are connected, that they are. Not that are good friends or something else or their higher self, but really, literally you are at those levels. And sometimes people on much higher levels even that. And so ever since that time, they have slowly opened my heart and have led me through everything I do.
Amazing. Really. And one thing I was reading that interests me was you said that the angels were about 10 foot tall.
Well, they appeared to my wife as human beings with wings. Mm-hmm. They appeared to me as spheres of light.
Right.
And I only saw them that way. It took me a year to be able to see them that way, and I saw them that way one time, and then poof, they went back to spheres. And what they said about this was that they don't really have form or shape, and that a sphere of light is the closest thing to their true nature, but that they appear as human beings with wings simply as a vehicle of communication. In other words, we can imagine that. It's hard to speak to a sphere of light. We can imagine a human being with wings, and that's been going on for thousands of years. And so they appear that way to human beings, but it isn't really their true nature.
Right, yes. So is this where your work with the flower of life and sacred geometry first started?
It is, yes. I knew nothing about sacred geometry, even though I was deeply into mathematics. Sacred geometry itself didn't seem that important. And the angel showed me little by little how the human energy field was created and the nature of it, and slowly I got to understand. Then it began to speed up faster as they started leading me to different teachers. And eventually I connected with a man named Phil out of Egypt. And that really began to go fast because he's a world's expert on this subject. And it still took several years, many years, of really beginning to understand that absolutely every single thing in existence is geometrical, and it all comes from one single image, which is, proves that there's one God or one mind, one thought that created everything we see.
And actually, I found it interesting that you said it's only us, our latest kind of technological age that has forgotten the flower of life. Back through history, it's actually everywhere. In all the cultures you've been, in all of the history that you've delved into, the flower of life is present from Japan to Tibet to, to the Native Americans,
everywhere.
isn't it?
And we're still finding that. Every 2 or 3 weeks, somebody sends us another image somewhere else in the world. We found it in hundreds and hundreds of places, everywhere. Even the Mayans had it here in this world.
So why did we forget it?
Well, I don't know if I could for sure say that reason, except that as we came down this cycle, the precession equinoxes, we're basically falling asleep. We were far more awake and intelligent in the beginning than we were as we come down toward this end. In modern days times, we think that we are the greatest thing that ever lived on Earth, and that modern technology is the proof of our super intelligence. But from an ancient point of view, it's proof of the exact opposite.
Yes.
I understand.
Yeah.
It's proof that we really don't understand the reality because we are building a separate reality, and we don't understand the nature of who we really are, because we can do everything and anything that any machine can ever do. Human being can do it without anything. We just have to understand who we are, and since we've forgotten that, we're relying on our brain, and that's a great flaw from higher levels of consciousness, from their way of thinking.
Yeah. So basically, a lot of your work to me seems to be about balance. We've got kind of this abundance of headspace stuff, and you're talking about bringing us back into our heart space, and toning down the head stuff again and remembering the heart stuff again. Would that be right?
Yes. Originally, we used to live within our hearts, and our brain was remote controlled from our hearts.
Yep.
It was a completely different way of existing. The Aboriginals in Australia still live that way. And so they have a hard time understanding the conclusions we come to. They don't get it, or the Maoris, or the Waitaha in New Zealand. I mean, they are functioning in a different way. And some of them have fallen into the same trap that we did, and have moved from their hearts to their brains. But the old ones are still old, still deeply connected people that are not that way.
Yeah.
And are living the old way.
Now, with the sacred geometry and the flower of life came the macabre, Can you give people a brief outline of what that is? Because I know that work is a whole understanding within itself, but I just think it's important to touch on it.
The Merkaba, first of all, is an ancient word. Merkaba is an Egyptian word. Merkaba is 3 words. Mer means a counter-rotating field of light. Ka means spirit, and Ba means body.
Mm-hmm.
And what it actually implies is that this counter-rotating field of light can take spirit and body from one level of existence to another. And in Hebrew, it's Merkava, and it means chariot or a vehicle again. And it also has another meaning, which is the throne of God.
Mm-hmm.
And in Zulu, Merkaba, which is said the same way as in Egypt, means exactly that, and they state that they came from another world on their Merkabas to Earth. This is their explanation
Mm-hmm.
of how they got here. And so, in simple terms, it's the human light body. And scientifically, we've mapped it, not all of it, but a lot of it, and it extends in a diameter of about 55 to 60 feet, depending on how tall you are. It's proportionate to your body height.
Mm-hmm.
And so for most people, it's 55 or 60 feet. If you were 7 feet tall, it would probably be even more. And the interior structure of this is all geometrical, extremely complex, and but based on shapes that are familiar to the human mind. All of them that are in there have all been discovered through geometry. I don't think there's any that have not been. It is electromagnetic in its that's what actually the energy that it's held within, and it sits at about 4 degrees Kelvin, which is very cold.
Mm-hmm.
It's only 4 degrees above absolute zero.
Mm.
So it's a very weak field from the physicist's point of view,
Mm-hmm.
and it's difficult to find it or to monitor it, because present-day thinking is that the instruments have to be down at 4 degrees Kelvin. That's not true. We've demonstrated that. We've had instruments at room temperature that could see the Merkaba, but it requires a new way of thinking that hasn't really emerged on Earth too much.
Mm-hmm.
But that's kind of a basic thing, and the images that are the geometrical forms that are around the body are the forms that you can show mathematically have created every single living form on Earth, and truly every single living form in existence. And they all came from different patterns that are found within inside of the human aura. And even more, the human aura is exactly the same around the Earth itself. Same patterns, and NASA is discovering this right now, that the energy, they've discovered the star tetrahedral field around the Earth and around the Sun and around planets, which is the inner core of the whole human light body. And they're slowly beginning to unravel this geometrical mystery around the Earth itself. And when we understand this, when this information comes back to humanity, and we understand that this light body is the actual energy patterns that have created every single thing in existence, then we begin to understand when the Bible said that humans were made in the image of God.
Mm-hmm.
Because it really is this image. It's not the human form that is what was created in the image of God. It was the energy field itself that's around us. That's the key. And when we learn how to use that and what it is, and how we begin to change consciousness through it, and it's a journey it's a journey back in time, really, because we once knew all this stuff, and then we had an accident. We forgot it. We fell down into this very dark place that we call good and evil consciousness, where we judge everything as good or bad.
Mm.
And we're now about to leave that way of consciousness and to return to where we were a long time ago.
Is this what's commonly known as the ascension?
Yes. Though ascension can be looked upon in different ways. If you look upon it as dimensional changes, which is the way that I originally did in the first couple books, then yeah, we're going up into higher dimensional levels. But now that I understand the relationship of the heart to the human energy field and how important that is. What ascension really is, the conclusion I finally come to after my entire life, is that it's not a change within the brain itself or a mind, but it's simply a movement of spirit from the brain back to the heart.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a movement of less than a foot and a half or so, and that's all ascension really is moving back into the heart, and from there everything happens easy, automatic, natural.
And I think
We're in that process right now.
that, yeah, I was just going to say, I think that probably we need to do that for ourselves, but I think more than anything, and I know you certainly understand this in the indigenous tribes that you meet with, and I really do feel that more people around the world are understanding that Mother Earth, or the Earth, is a living organism that lives, breathes, is recently birthed,
Yeah.
and the more as we ascend, she'll ascend, and it's all working together. And hopefully, with NASA picking up on this, the grid around the.
I agree with you. That is exactly right. She's a living, breathing being, and she is fully conscious, and her energy field her Merkaba field is functioning now, and everything is preparing for this change. And we really, to return to the heart, what all the indigenous people are telling me all over the world, everywhere, is exactly the same thing. You can't return to the heart until you become one with Mother Earth and you connect with her in love.
Mm.
And also Father Sky, which is the opposite end of the pole,
Mm-hmm.
to all the rest of creation, the stars everywhere.
Mm.
And so the Divine Mother, Mother Earth, and the Divine Father, all the rest of creation, you have to connect with both of these two poles with love. Otherwise, what it does when you do that is it creates a vibration within your being,
Mm-hmm.
a very specific signature. And when you enter into your heart, if you don't have that signature, the heart won't let you in.
Mm.
It just blocks. It won't let you in.
Mm-hmm.
And so the key that, and the Aboriginals were one of the first ones in Australia, the first ones to tell me this, is that in order to return to the heart and to the original state of being that we were in, that's where you begin. First place is you go down and you connect with Mother Earth.
Mm-hmm.
And then later, when you have really established that pure love between you and your mother, then you connect the love between you and your father.
Mm. It's so important, I'm a great earth-loving being, always have been, and it's been actually quite painful to feel what the Earth has been going through. But I really truly do feel that a lot of people are now waking up, and even on a global scale, as you said, NASA's now starting to understand that there is this consciousness grid around the Earth, and I think people are starting to understand that everything is interconnected. I truly hope they are. And I always say to people, if you want to get back down to Earth, the best thing you can do is watch your kids. Kids are great being with Mother Earth. They roll in it, they love in it, they speak to her.
They still have that connection to Mother Earth, but very often when they come to puberty, they lose it.
Mm-hmm.
And they enter into the adult world, which we think is more advanced.
Mm.
Perhaps not.
No, exactly. I wanted to touch now on your, that flows kind of nicely into your Serpent of Light, which is your latest work. And it's a very personal retelling of a journey that you've taken, that sometimes you didn't even understand why you were going. You just purely went on trust, which is extraordinary. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, again, every time I did anything, and still to this day, whenever I do anything, I don't do it on my own or my ego. I only do things when the angels tell me, okay, this is the next level, that this is the next step you must do. You must connect with certain tribes here, there, wherever it is, and they will connect with you. And it's always been amazing, because every time that I have decided to do this, they have called me and invited me.
Mm-hmm.
I've always been invited to every tribe. I've never just showed up and said hi. There's always been an invitation, and that is almost all the tribes in the world. That is the way it's supposed to be done. But the angels would first say, okay, you need to be with a Zulu, you need to be with the Rapa Nui or whoever it is, and then they would invite me. I would go there, and we'd do ceremony together. And they knew just as much as I knew I knew what the angels told me it was going to be about. But when I got there, I didn't have to tell them. They already knew what the ceremony was for, and they knew why we were doing it. And this has been every single time.
Kind of like a we've been waiting for you situation.
Yeah, they're using me. I know they are, and I don't mind it. They found someone that can communicate on the same level they can, and they're using me to try to reach the world. It's accelerated tremendously since that book. The book was, the manuscript was given in June of 2007. In July of 2007, the head of the entire Mayan nation came to my house here in Sedona. His name is Don Alejandro Cirillo. And just to give you a little idea who he is, there is 440 Mayan tribes in Mexico, Belize, and Guatemala. And each one of them has an elder that is the head of that tribe. Those 440 tribes make up the Mayan Council, and then from that they then vote in one member to be their head, and that's Don Alejandro Cirillo. And he came here, and he wanted to. Well, he had a lot of things he wanted me to do for him. And one of them is that as he began to explain, he said that there is everything that we have ever read about the Mayan people, all the books, and there's a lot of them all over the world, and a lot of information has been written. They haven't written. They haven't. They've come from governments and archaeologists and universities and people, but he said to me, they haven't written a single word in 526 years. They've been silent. And so now, because we're approaching 2012, he says we need, our calendar and our guidance says that we need to write a book for the world to tell them what our prophecy is for this time. And then also, even more important than the prophecy, of how to live during these times so that you can survive. And not only just survive, but to go on to higher levels of being, which is what these moments like we're about to enter into, what they present to humankind.
I found that so interesting when I stopped and actually thought about that. Reading that and hearing you say that before, that because you're right, the Mayan prophecies and what the Mayans said and what the Mayans believe, it gets thrown around all the time. And when I actually stopped and I heard that you said, look, they haven't actually written a word about their own history in 500 years, I thought, that's amazing, considering they're quoted so often and you hear so often, the Mayans said this and the Mayans believe that. And I think it's so important that the Mayans now actually are stepping forward and saying, well, actually we are going to write a book about what our prophecies mean.
They're writing it now. That was the other part of the thing he wanted. He says, okay, that's the basis. He says, but our calendar says that we must begin this on a certain day, which is coming up very soon. And so this is July. And he says, in November, we must begin, and our prophecy says that the world will be watching us as we begin. And he says, we interpret that as that we need a group of people from all over the world, and our elders say that you're the person to do this. So they wanted 60 people, so I went out and got 60 people from around the world from 23 countries. And so that's what we did. He took us into Guatemala. We first did ceremony with him and with some of the elders from the tribes. We did a fire ceremony at Lake Atitlan, And at the end of that ceremony, he then brought us into this room where 25 of the elders had been selected to be the ones to write this, and they were just sitting there waiting for us. And as we all sat down, they said, "Okay, we are now going to begin because the world is watching us." And they started with 0, and the glyph for 0, and they reinterpreted all the various things on there, what they mean. And it took them hours and hours and hours just on 0. And then we watched them go to 1. And so they were slowly moving through the numbers and then through the alphabet, and then eventually to the meaning of what these things mean and how it relates to this time that we're in now. We won't really know fully everything until they're done, and they'll be done sometime in 2009. And then he wanted me to publish the book, but that's easy. I mean, the publisher was just about doing cartwheels on the they'll probably sell. I mean, there's about 400 or 500 million people waiting for this, so there's going to be a lot of books sold.
And talk about going right to the source, you know.
And then what happened after that, I can't tell you right now. It's very personal, but they just gave me permission to write a book about them writing a book. And so, and we're having another meeting this afternoon with this, but we're going to, there will be a sequel to the Serpent of Light, which will talk about all the ceremonies and where this was leading in with the Mayan people. And then there's things like this. He asked me to bring certain other elders, and just, he didn't say who or what, and I invited Grandfather Eric from the Hopi tribe.
Yes.
And he is from the Bluebird clan, who are the ones who are the historians of the Hopi tribe. And I'm riding on a bus with him, and he discovered that I was connected to Grandfather David, who is the holder of the Hopi tribe for a long time. He's passed over now. And he really opened up into me, and we started talking, and he says, you know, the Mayans are saying that they haven't written any, you know, they haven't said anything in so long. Well, he says, we're in a similar position. He says the archaeologists say that we moved across the Bering Strait thousands of years ago and came down through Alaska and Canada and into the United States, and that's where we came from. They're convinced. It's in all the books. He says, we didn't come from there. We know that. It's in our songs. It's in our ceremonies. We know exactly where we came from. We were Mayan. And so I listened as Grandfather Eric and Grandfather Don Alejandro, as they began to compare their prophecies, which are identical, and how Grandfather Eric remembered, and so did the Mayan Council, that long, long ago the Mayans sent a group north, and who they were are the Hopi.
Wow.
So they're the same tribe, and their prophecies are identical.
Amazing.
They're absolutely identical.
Yeah. And I'm
so this one little thing, and you'll understand why I'm doing all this lead-in. If you remember, in October, there was a comet that came in called Comet Holmes.
Yes, last year.
Yeah, and it blew up on October 24th in space and became a big sphere of blue light. That sphere rapidly became bigger than the sun. And scientifically now, the Comet Holmes, this sphere of blue light, is now the largest object that has ever appeared in our solar system ever.
Wow.
But that blue sphere of light was prophesied by the Hopi 200 years ago, as it would be the window or the doorway into this special time that the Mayans call the end of time. And the Mayans, all the Native Americans here now have accepted that as a symbol, and the Mayans have too, that it is the sign that, so from October 24th of 2007, we have now entered into what the Mayans call the end of time, which is a period of time about 7 to 8 years long. And so at this point, the predictions of the Hopi and the Mayan and another tribes which are down in South America, which we can talk about perhaps, that are all saying the same thing, that we are going to watch as this entire world that we now know and we're so familiar with literally fades away. It will just disappear in ways that are amazing. And a whole new way of interpreting life and what everything is reappears, a beautiful new way. They talk about how this is the greatest time that humanity has ever experienced, is what we're about to enter into.
Is this the earth changes and
All
things?
the way back into the Vedas, 6,000 years ago, and they talk about the same thing, how we, at this particular time, we learn about electricity and magnetism, we fly around in metal boxes, and then on a single day, we throw it away. And the Hopis and the Mayans are saying the same thing.
And is this the earth changes that we're talking about basically here?
Very massive earth changes that absolutely change everything. But it is a change not just in the earth, but it's a change in human consciousness of how we perceive each other and this world.
And
so this is a... Go ahead.
I was just going to say, so this book that obviously the Mayans are writing, because that date, December 12, 2012, has been bandied around a lot. So the window of time that has opened last year, which would be 2007, and you're saying it's kind of a 7-year thing, so it kind of heads up to 2014. That kind of still flows over that date, and we can expect a lot of earth changes to be happening from now.
Well, the Mayans are predicting there will be a pole shift.
Okay.
And scientifically, it's very interesting because scientifically, the date of December 21st, 2012, which was not a Mayan date, their dates are slightly different. That's a date that Jose Aguilas brought up to the world based upon the precession of the equinoxes. But in terms of that precession, if you go back it's a 26,000-year cycle, and if you go halfway, 13,000 years ago, we, scientifically, the Earth did have a pole shift and a magnetic pole shift at the same time. And it was incredible. Huge sections of the United States, for example, the whole western coast, eastern coast rather, emerged out of the water. And Atlantis, if you want to believe in that one, which I do, it went down at that time. And mountain ranges were formed, and huge, it's a big deal. And if you go 26,000 years ago, exactly where we are right now, there was another pole shift with massive earth changes on incredible levels. And that's all been documented by science. And so the Hopi and the Mayan are both predicting that sometime in this next 7 years, they will not give a date like December 21st. They just said sometime in these next 7 years, we're going to see the Earth radically changed. And scientifically, the pole shift is only 20 hours long.
Yeah, I was going to say that regardless of the date, if the poles shift, your whole life, as you could ever imagine it, will basically be changed completely, very quickly.
Forever.
Yeah.
All governments will be crashed, all financial systems, all everything. It just dissolves away because we start over. And that's Mother Earth doing that. We can't say it's wrong or right. It's her decision.
But you've also... You've also...
And on the History Channel, only about 2 months ago, the world scientists, which is about 1,500 scientists, got together, and they are predicting scientifically that there will be a pole shift based on what's going on with the magnetic field of the Earth.
And you've also...
So it's not just the natives saying this. This is the rest of the world is also saying this.
Yeah. And in your book, The Serpent of Light, you talk about how this earth changes actually marries into the Earth's Kundalini. And, most people are familiar with their own Kundalini, but you actually said, explain that the Earth has a Kundalini, and as it moves and re-anchors itself, this is all tied in. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, it is. And the indigenous people are very, very aware of this and are very clear. The industrial people of the world have no idea, hardly. There might be a few, but most of us don't. But as we were speaking about the Merkaba field, or the light body, how it's identical that's around a human being is exactly the same that's around the Earth. Well, when you look at the chakra system running up the human body, the Earth has a similar kind of thing, moving from the center of the Earth, which is like the base of our spine, up to the top, up to the surface, and every 13,000 years, there is this energy that comes out of the center of the Earth that connects in with somewhere on the surface. And 13,000 years ago, it was in the western mountains of Tibet. And that is the light of the world. That is what everyone that lives within hundreds of miles of that area, it causes their kundalini to rise, and it causes them to awaken to higher levels of consciousness. And then they become some of the most important teachers in the world. And that is the reason why they were there. Now it is moved to another high up in the mountains in northern Chile, into the Andes, and it's been there since 2002. But there's a lot that has happened since that book has been written, The Serpent of Light, that happened in January and February, which is huge. But the other thing about the Kundalini of the Earth, it puts out a certain teaching, a certain vibration or understanding of the reality. And for the last 13,000 years, we've been listening to that coming from many people around the world. But now, the new Kundalini will give us a new spirituality, a new understanding of the reality that we don't know now. And that's going to take time. There's just nothing we can do on that but to wait. There's also a polarity shift that takes place on December 21st, 2012, which is when the male cycle, which has been in place for 13,000 years, switches over to the female cycle. And so what the indigenous people are telling us everywhere is that not only will there be a new light and a new understanding, but it will be females primarily who are the ones who will be telling the world about this and teaching us, not males. That cycle is ending, and now for the next 13,000 years, it's females who will be leading us back into the light. It will be women who heal the world of the kinds of things that we all know are wrong. The war and the starvation and the not caring about people, and all these. We all know what it is.
Yeah.
But it'll be women who understand how to take us out of that and back into a world where everybody cares about everybody.
Yeah. Again, it's that balance where I was talking about before, where if we get unbalanced in one way, then we have to bring it back again. And I think everybody would agree that it's been very kind of, the technological age has been very male, very kind of intellectual, very kind of headspace, and moving back into that nurturing, earth-driven mother connection side of it is probably good for all of us.
It's essential. If we continue in this male-driven technological way that we're going, the Earth will die, and so will we. We can't make it. I mean, there are a lot of problems on this Earth right now that we don't even know about, and I don't really want to bring them up right now. And we're only thinking about global warming. That's only one. There's a lot of them. And we can solve all of these problems perfectly, but we have to enter into our hearts, and we have to understand the female side and live it. And we will. Now, 13,000 years from now, the female side gets weird and distorted. It always does, toward the end of it. And we switch over to the male, which saves us again, and we come down. Everything with the male was pretty good until we got in the last couple thousand years, and especially in the last 150 years, when we get to the end and the males think that logic is the only answer, where actually what saves us is not logic. It's the female way, which is completely unlogical.
I wanted to touch on a few things that you've written about, I believe, in The Serpent of Light, or anyway, I wanted to touch on our original creators, because I have a fascination, as much as I have a fascination for what's going on in the cosmos and the universe and other planets. I truly believe a lot of where we come from and what we understand in our history is hidden in the inner earth. And I know you have some thoughts about our ancestors and where they've been is probably on the inner earth as well.
Yes, one of our ancestors does live in the inner earth, and they have been interacting with us on the surface for about the last 20 years or so, but mostly only out of Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting, they've chosen that place.
Mm.
And they are called, down there, they are the plasma ships. I've seen them on video, and I've watched their ships. They are huge orange disc-shaped ships, and they come right out of the earth, right out of solid rock.
Mm-hmm.
And they landed in near the huge volcano of Topo, south of Mexico City a few years ago. 7 of them landed right in the city. And I got to watch one of these videos of this Mexican lady who was completely just so excited she couldn't even. The whole time she was running the film, she was just breathing heavy and screaming every once in a while. They landed right out. They landed about 100 yards away from her house, and they were just walking around. They were about 3.5 feet high, and they were orange-colored light. As they would step off the ship would get smaller, and then when they would actually walk right through each other because they were just pure light.
Wow.
And then when they would get back on the ship, it would get bigger, and the ship would rise up in the air and then break into 2 equal ships and go into different directions.
Mm-hmm.
When Germany analyzed these photographs, their computers thought that it was a living cell, alive. They didn't know it was a spaceship. They thought it was a living organism.
Mm-hmm.
And from our ways of connecting with these people, we believe this too. That's part of it. But there's also external mother and fathers that live off the surface that are actually ETs.
Yeah.
Those are ancestors, and they are here. I'll tell you a little bit more, which is kind of interesting. They talk about how they used to be on the surface of the earth, just like us. And they said they went down a very similar pathway where they learned about electricity and magnetism and atomic energy and all these things. And this is a long time ago. I don't really know how long, but it could be as much as 100 million years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And they had done exactly the same thing. They were killing the earth with their technology, and everything was dying. And then an ET race came and landed on the planet and walked up to them and told them something about themselves. That's all they did. They said, "Let me just tell you something about yourself." They told them that, and they left, and they never came back. It took them 100 years, they said, to understand what this meant. And then when they did, their bodies became pure light. And they then chose to go inside the earth to live.
Mm-hmm.
This is the story they told us.
Mm-hmm.
And but they are still, they feel that we are their brothers and sisters, and they understand what we're going through right now, and all they want to do is to tell us something about ourselves.
Mm.
And that thing has to do with the heart and the nature of what the heart is. And but we also have literally an external ET mother and father, and that one, the mother is the Nephilim, which is from another planet here in our own solar system, which is sometimes called Marduk.
Mm-hmm.
And NASA has discovered that planet. They now know it's real. They have mapped it. They have mapped the size of it. You can't see it. It's a long ways away, and it only comes through our solar system visibly every 3,600 years.
Mm.
And it's going to be at least another 500 years before it actually comes through.
Mm-hmm.
But the people that are on that planet merged with another race, which is from the star Sirius, and the Syrian beings were the male aspect, and they created the human race. Now this is written down in the oldest writings in the world from Sumeria.
Mm-hmm.
When they discovered the Sumerian tablets, the 100,000 Sumerian tablets, and began to read them, that's the story that they talk about.
Mm.
Well, I believe what the indigenous people are telling me all over the world is that they're here now. They've come back, both of them, both Mommy and Daddy, and that they're here, and that very soon they are going to reconnect with us. They're waiting for something. I don't know exactly what it is yet, but once that takes place, then they are going to reconnect and in a loving, beautiful way. The only thing is these beings are very tall. The females are about 10 to 12 feet high, and the males are about 14 to 16 feet high. And so obviously this would be a huge shock to the human race if this really happens.
Interesting.
But, they're all telling me this, all over the whole world. They're saying the same thing.
Well, it's interesting to hear that because, of course, Edgar Mitchell came out and said, and he said this many times before, but this time mainstream media paid attention to what he said only a few weeks ago, that he as an astronaut can confirm all that you're saying, basically, not perhaps about the tall whites, but certainly that we have had contact with, other world races, and I was pleasantly surprised by the way, at least in Australia, some of the mainstream media, I won't say all of it, but some of the mainstream media actually stood up, took notice, and presented some half-decent, intelligent journalism about what Mr. Mitchell had said, or Dr. Mitchell had said. Not all of them did, but some of them did, and I thought that was a very positive, comforting move.
Well, usually science accepts the oldest writings as the truth. And if you just go back into Zacharias Sitchin's work of the 12th planet, which is simply the interpretation of what was being said on those tablets, then it's clear because that's what they say. They were very clear about where we came from and how we were created and why and who did it and everything. And there was no ambiguity at all. And so you can go a long ways in this. There's a lot more to this. If you go into the Maori and the Waitaha, for example, and the Aboriginal, especially the Rainbow Dolphin tribe out of Australia, they all say that their creators were the dolphins and the whales. And what's interesting is that the Syrians, they say that they were created by the dolphins and the whales. And then this relationship between Sirius and the Earth has been defined by science in an extraordinary way, because the wobble that actually causes the precession of the equinox, the wobble that is in the Earth, and the way that the sun moves around through space, through the galaxy, they have noticed that there is a spiraling motion that moves through that, which meant that somebody, some star, something out there, was gravitationally connected to our sun. And when science started tracking that down and narrowing it down, eventually they came up and realized that the star Sirius and our sun are linked through gravity, and they move in a double helical pattern through space as they move around the galaxy. And then that double helical pattern was traced down to be identical to the human DNA.
Wow.
And so the fact that our parents could have come, what they're saying is came from our father after coming from Sirius, it would be the most likely candidate in the entire universe as the place that they came from.
How important to these other nations, both internally and externally, throughout the universe and in our Earth, how important is it to them that we reconnect to that heart space and ascend, and these Earth changes and the evolving consciousness of Mother Earth? How important is all of that important to them?
Well, what the Aboriginals are saying all over the world is that if we don't do that, we can't survive. To them, it's not even a maybe. discussions, if we do not enter back into our heart and understand the connection, then we can't. And I actually feel that until we do that, we're not going to see our mother and our father. That races that created us. I don't think we will be able to if we are still in our brains and our minds. I don't think we'll be able to do this. I don't know how God and Mother Earth and everyone is going to do this, because this is a big change in humankind.
Yep.
I believe that the pole shift will be a major change in humanity. I don't see how it can be, because something of this big, it's not likely that there'll be a single building left standing on this planet. Because this is such a big thing.
Yeah.
When that happens, because the buildings that we have are pretty weak. The Great Pyramids made it through.
Yeah.
But not too many normal buildings are able to left standing after that. And so all I can say is, from everything I can see, this is an extraordinary, absolutely incredible time in human history. And that and what all of these indigenous people everywhere are telling me, and the angels, is that we are about to undergo a huge change in who we think we are and what we think everything is. And that this change is not a bad or a painful thing. It is something that is beautiful. It is like a huge spiritual gift that God's giving to us. This is, if we really understood, especially like what the Waitaha were telling me, if we really understood what was about to happen, we'd be out celebrating. We'd be going, well, finally we can come out of this place, this dark place, and we're going to be able to be free again. The Mayans say that we're not just free, we're free to move around the entire universe.
Wow.
And as soon as we enter into our hearts and we return back to our natural state, that our quarantine is over. We are free to be anywhere we want to be in ways that we can't even imagine right now. And so, if all these things are true, this is no little change. This isn't just another chromosome unfolding. This is something really big.
Yeah, it's life like we've never known it, and I would not imagine that we would not have, been put here without support from Mother Earth, from God. We're not meant to fail. That's a terrible word, fail. But really, if we stand back and look at it, we're supported in every possible way that we could be, if we return to that heart space again. Try not to think of support in a technological headspace type of way, but certainly in the heart space way, we're very, very supported, aren't we?
Yeah, and well, when we're children and we're babies, the mother energy is essential, and as we make this change that we're about to make, the female mother energy is going to be just as essential, because we're just like little children right now. We think we're big, sophisticated adults, and we know so much. But we aren't really. From our parents, from our cosmic parents, we're just babies, and we are going to go under changes physically as well as through our hearts and our minds. We're physically going to become something a little different than what we appear to be now. There's going to be very huge growth changes in our appearance and how we appear and what our capabilities are. This is what I'm being told from different tribes and people around the world.
I can't help but think it's a great time to be alive personally.
Oh yeah, I can hardly wait.
Yeah.
But it's already happening now. Just so I'll tell you one more thing about the grid that's around the Earth. This consciousness grid, which we couldn't move into the next level of consciousness without it. It's essential.
Yep.
Every single species on Earth has a grid. Even there's two little bugs walking around, and they're the only ones. There's an electromagnetic grid that is unique to them that's around the whole world.
Yep.
There used to be about 30 million different species on Earth only 100 and something years ago. Now, depending on who you talk to, there's about half of those are gone. They're extinct. And so it's dropping very quick. And there's three different ones for humankind. There's the old one that the Aboriginals are on. There's the one we're on now, and there's a new one that's been formed. And that one is the one we're about to move to. Well, that grid, which is based on, for some of you who understand this, is based on a pentagonal icosahedron, a pentagonal dodecahedral relationship, and an icosahedron, which in the ancient ways is prana, life force energy, and water mixed together. And that one was discovered by Russia in about the 1960s. The one we're on now was discovered by the United States in the 1950s. They know they're there. And but this one that we're about to move into was created synthetically. You see, we used to be on this, and then when we fell, we misused energy and we fell. Well, it dissolved away, and so we had nowhere. We couldn't go back, and we went to this one that we're on now. But to get back to the old one, we got permission from the center of the galaxy to be able to do this, because normally you can't. You're just not given permission. You can't interfere with evolution. But because we'd reached that stage once before, they said, okay, you can do this. And as far back as 13,200 years ago, they began to build pyramids around the world. And as of about 1990, there were 83,000 approximately pyramids, temples, buildings, structures that were interconnected and were used as geomancy on the Earth to bring the internal structures of the Earth out externally to surround the Earth with this electromagnetic field. And by about 1989, 1990, it was functioning, but it wasn't geometrically perfect. And so there were changes that had to take place in order to do that. Well, the very last change on that took place in January of 2008, and that was on Easter Island with the Arapa Nui. They invited us there to do ceremony, and we went there and did the ceremony, which corrected the final little piece that was above Chile. And then it was there that I understood, and was told actually, why that place was saved for last, because that was the distortion in the grid that was keeping the Kundalini that was in Chile, up in the mountains, from functioning. They didn't want it to function prematurely, and so they kept that there, and which kept it, even though it was in place in 2002, nothing really was happening, very, very little. And then when we did that ceremony, that corrected the final grid, and the Kundalini began actually functioning and radiating out to the world. Then we were sent immediately to Moorea, which is in the Tahitian Islands, out in the middle of the South Pacific, which is where the south pole of the new grid emerged out of the Earth. And there, the queen of the Polynesian Islands gave us permission to begin to do a ceremony, to do the final ceremony, which would birth this new grid out into the world. It was funny because she couldn't. We asked to do it in the middle of the island, and she freaked out, even though she'd already given us permission, because she didn't have control of that section of the island. And another woman there who worked with her, they actually began to fight, and eventually began to scream and yell, and she finally said, "No, you can't do this." And I remember going home that night thinking, "Oh my God, millions of people all over the world have created this grid for 13,200 years, and built 83,000 billion, and then two women fight it, but it doesn't happen." And, no, this can't be. It just can't be. And it wasn't. A couple days later, the king of the island, who the two of them worked together, he found out what had happened, and he called us in before him. And I went in there with a Maori grandmother, Ruth, who spoke that language. And we went out to his home where he was, and we sat in front of him, but he was about 10 feet away, and he's squinting. We realized he's old, he's 86, and he can't walk hardly, and he says, "You got to get closer." So I got about half that distance. He goes, "No, a lot closer." So I pulled my seat all the way up to within about 2 feet of his face, and he's looking at me, and he's looking at me, and he's like going around. All of a sudden, he goes, "Oh, I know you." He says, "You're from the stars." He says, "I've been waiting for you all my life." He says, "You can do anything you want. What do you want to do?" and then I told him in the middle of the island, he says, "Well, you can do that, but I really want to be part of this ceremony. This is the most, I've been waiting my whole life for this ceremony, and I can't walk." He says, "Would you do it here on this beach?" And so we did. We ended up doing this the next day on the beach, and it happened to be pure coincidence, the day when the Earth and the Moon and the Sun were in a straight line, and there was a lunar eclipse, and the shadow went right over the top of us on that day as we did the ceremony.
Wow.
And it was the beginning of the birth of the baby of this new consciousness coming out into the world. And the next day, one from the people that were there went out and took a photograph of the spot, and from 30 feet away there was a bright 5-pointed star glowing on the point where we did our ceremony. And then she went right up to it within just 3 feet or a meter and took a photograph, and it looked like it was almost neon. And then the Polynesians called us up the next day because all the fish had left for 15 years ago. And the next morning, all the beautiful fish had returned to the bay for the first time in 15 years.
Amazing.
And I knew it was the birth. And then 1 month later, or 27-point-something days later, the sun and the earth and the moon lined up again, and there was another lunar eclipse, and that one went right over Sedona, where I was. And that was the birth at that moment. And so we now live in a brand new world. We don't know it yet, but it's happened. And we can't fail now. There were people from all over the universe that were not sure and actually didn't believe that we would be able to make this transition. And it didn't look like it. But what Melchizedek consciousness knows is that whenever the consciousness grid is born and it's actually out alive and breathing, there's never been a single example since the beginning of time that the life form has not been able to make it. That means, so for us, it's happened. The rest of the world hasn't caught up yet, but this is really a time of great celebration.
It is. I can understand why I have friends who have done your workshops while you've been here in Australia, and they all speak very highly of you. And having had this chance to share all that you've got to say, I can see why. I am very appreciative of the time that you've spent with us here. You've been very generous with your time, and I now understand why they do speak so highly of you. I know if you go to, I'll give out your webpage now. If you go to Ghost Radio, of course, you'll see Drunvalo's face there, and you can get along to all of his web pages. He's got some good ones. It's drunvalo.net, there's thefloweroflife.org, and there's also thespiritofmaat.com, which is Drunvalo's the editor-in-chief of that web page there. It's like an online magazine with tons and tons of information. If you get along to Ghost Radio, you can click on through to all of those web pages and all of those links from there. And you can see where Drunvalo is going to be, because I've noticed that you're touring quite extensively. Any thoughts of coming back to Australia?
Oh, I love Australia. I almost moved there once. My family, all of us, I love Australia, and I love the Australian people. It's such a great spirit. But I don't know. I've just been given a television station that'll go global. Nice. And I may, if this all happens, we're signing the papers now pretty soon. And if that happens, I'm probably not going to be traveling over the next 3 years, but I'll be speaking on television channels. And those channels do go into Australia.
So, I mean, you know, the information is there for anybody who wants it. Obviously, all of Drunvalo's books are available from his webpage, any good bookstore, Amazon, you can find them anywhere. The latest, of course, is the Serpent of Light, which we've discussed very briefly here. This is a very brief overview of all of the work Drunvalo's done throughout the years. And what can I say except thank you. Thank you very much for all that you've done, all that you continue to do, all that you share, and any last thoughts that you'd like to leave with us about probably what's the most important thing that you feel we need to understand right now?
Well, really, it's so simple, it's hard. And that is to quit being so serious, be more childlike and playful, and enter into your heart. And it's that simple. It's really easy. All the sophisticated thinking and all that kind of stuff, it doesn't help. The more PhDs you have, the harder it is to find the simplicity of life. And so it's really about letting go and just believing in yourself, believing in that the truth is that God lives within you, and there's nothing to be afraid of. It's just it's easy. And so it's just being like a child again. This is the way.
Thank you very much for your time tonight.
Thank you, Leah. I really do thank you for doing this. Thank you very much.
Okay, that's Underworld for this week. Thank you so much for joining us. Stay safe and blessings to you all.
You've been listening to Australia's own Underworld Show with host Leah Ramses. The Underworld Show is produced in Perth, Western Australia by iProdigy Communications exclusively for Ghost Radio Australia and the Ghost Radio Network. Tune in every Sunday at 8 p.m. Perth time to hear fascinating guests and topics such as the one you just listened to. For more information on upcoming guests, events, and breaking news, visit www.underworldshow.com or www.ghostradio.com.au.